There is an old building crumbling away in the Osu district of Accra that tells us a tragic story of greed, wealth, and suffering. These are the remains of the Richter Fort, the fortified residence and private slave fort of Heinrich Richter, the merchant they called the richest man on the Gold Coast in the first half of the 19th century. This historical building is now threatened by urbanization and neglect. If nothing gets done, it will disappear. And with it, a rare witness of the times when slavery was still a central part of society, even after the transatlantic slave trade had been abolished. To explore the Richter Fort, you first have to find this grand white entrance off Osu Alata's busiest road, bearing the monograms of the original owners. To help us understand the Richter Fort, we have asked Professor Ni Ajiri Wellington, historian of the area of Osu, to bring the story of the old building back to life. Once you pass the archway, you enter a large compound where more than 100 people live and work today.
I'm standing in the entrance courtyard of the Richter Fort. And behind me, on my north side, you have the remains of the Barbara House.
In the middle of the courtyard stands a monumental staircase which once led to the main house called Barbara House, totally destroyed today.
It was a house built by a Danish man called Johannes Emanuel Richter, who was in the Danish administration and who had a lot of strong interactions with the local people. You see a flight of steps going up to connect the ground floor and the first floor of this house, which is an expression of wealth and power in the community at that time.
Johann Emanuel Richter is one of the first European settlers to mix public duties and private enterprise. After arriving on the Guinea coast in 1782, he becomes commandant of the forts of Prinsenstein and Friedensborg. He then finishes his career as governor of the Danish Gold Coast. However, during that entire period, he also acts as a private merchant, selling captives to Danish and foreign slave ships. Nothing remains of the Barbara House today, after the building was largely destroyed by an earthquake in 1939. But these pictures taken in the early 1960s and historical records allow us to reconstruct the house. Barbara House is built around 1807 by Johann Emanuel Richter, who names the building after his concubine, Barbara Kuberg, an Afro-European woman from Osu who is the daughter of a powerful European slave trader. Barbara House is a tropicalized version of a Georgian-style mansion. The storerooms on the ground floor are protected from direct sunlight by stone-arched passages. An external staircase leads to living quarters reserved for the Richter family and a large, luxurious dining hall for receptions. After the death of Johann Emanuel Richter in 1817, his older son, Heinrich, becomes the new owner of Barbara House. Heinrich is what the Europeans call a mulatto, born in the Gold Coast from a European father and an African mother. A new community produced by the transatlantic slave trade that is rapidly becoming very powerful. Heinrich continues in his father's footsteps as a private merchant and takes the business to new levels. In 1829, Heinrich Richter transforms Barbara House into a fort. High stone walls are built all around the perimeter to protect the traders' storehouses from looters, with bastions at the four corners of the fortifications. This new private fort is built only a mile away from Christiansborg Castle. Following the end of the transatlantic slave trading by the Danish royal administration in 1803, private merchants like Heinrich Richter become the new influential elite. For decades after, they will have an ambivalent and often competitive relationship with the castle's officials.
Above this bastion will be cannons, from which cannonballs will be shot out in case there were any attack from outside. But unfortunately, because people are not aware of the value of these remains, gradually the remains are being destroyed. I'm sure next time I'm here, all this we see as the remains of the bastion will not be there any longer.
Today, most of the perimeter walls surrounding the Richter Fort have disappeared, and the stones have been used to build small houses. However, a doorway that once connected the fort to the outside world is still standing. Here and there, old stones appearing through cement tell us a silent story. Walking on the side of the courtyard, you enter a series of empty rooms which hold a central part of the history of the Richter Fort.
So now we are in the western section of the Richter Fort. These spaces was zoned to have facilities for storage.
At the height of Heinrich Richter's business empire, these large rooms were filled with goods imported from Europe, or merchandise ready to be exported across the Atlantic. Gold, palm oil, gunpowder, weapons and brandy. By the 1820s, Richter has become the most powerful import-export merchant on the Gold Coast. Heinrich Richter is part of a new generation of private entrepreneurs taking advantage of the new so-called legitimate trade. Following the abolition of the slave trade by the Danes and the British, the old transatlantic slave trade routes are being used by merchants of the Gold Coast to trade new raw agricultural products. Palm oil is sent to Britain and America to lubricate machines in the factories of the Industrial Revolution. Cocoa, cotton, and rubber are also high in demand. In return, African merchants receive imported goods for the local market: cannons, rifles, flint, and gunpowder, as well as alcoholic spirits and fabrics. Colossal fortunes are built out of this new import-export market. Throughout the period as a legal merchant, Heinrich Richter also trades in enslaved people, both for the indigenous slavery market and for the transatlantic illegal slave trade.
When there is need for the enslaved people to be taken out of the fort, they will be brought from their rooms, from the female section to the male section, and be sorted out here before they will be taken out into the courtyard, from where the buyers will come and take them away to their farms, to their homes, or to wherever place they want to make use of them.
Following the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade by the Danes and then the British, slave ships gradually stop leaving the Gold Coast. Captives are taken on foot from the Gold Coast to other slaving ports further down the coast, like Ouida or Lagos. New areas of the coast of Africa become actively involved in illegally slave trading. This illegal trade will continue for the next 60 years. Several million enslaved men, women, and children will still be forcibly transported illegally to the plantations of Brazil, Cuba, and North America. Another form of slave trade also increases after abolition, supplying enslaved men and women to indigenous slave markets. For centuries, large numbers of captives have been transported all across the country due to the transatlantic slave trade, and some of them have been sold locally. In the early 19th century, the enslaved work everywhere, in the fields, in the mines, in the homes. Domestic slavery has become a social norm. Heinrich Richter's fortune keeps growing. In the 1830s, he employs over 200 people, travels several times to Europe, and trades with clients from around the world. We get a glimpse of that incredible wealth in a letter written in 1836 by a young Danish official, Wolf Joseph Wolf, who has just settled on the Guinea coast.
There's a man by the name of Richter living here who is said to own 8 to 10 barrels of gold. He has 400 slaves, and he's married to a princess from Asante. I have often been invited to his home. One enjoys all manner of rare foods that he imports from all the corners of the earth, and you enjoy a variety of drinks, very fine and costly wines, port, ales, and champagnes in great quantities.
With wealth comes political power. Richter and other merchants are also important players in the many wars between African and European forces that occur throughout the 19th century on the Gold Coast. In 1826, Heinrich Richter sides with the coalition of Danes, British, and Ga-Dangbe soldiers against the Asante army. For the Battle of Dodowa, Richter sells weapons and gunpowder to the coalition and supplies more than 100 of his personal slaves armed with rifles. Large numbers of prisoners of war are captured and many become Richter's property. Selected captives are sold into slavery. Others from influential families are kept as hostages to be used as pawns in future negotiations. The Asante queen, Ikuapusua, is amongst the hostages. She is kept in Richter Fort for years, and eventually one of her daughters gives birth to a son by Heinrich Richter. In front of the staircase, a game of aware is dug into the paving stones of the courtyard. This game, played by the royals at the Asante court, reminds us of the complexity of destinies that are met here. Stories of wealth and success, but also stories of violence and pain.
These spaces in the past served evil purposes, but at the moment, the spaces are being occupied by families, children, husbands, wives. One would wonder, how would this feel? Now, my interaction with them is that they want to blot out the past evil purposes of these spaces. That's why in the Ghana culture, we don't talk about the transatlantic slave trade or slavery. We make reference to the so-called Achi Mota. So these families who are living in former spaces of evil have blotted out from their minds. For me, these places are very sacred, places where our ancestors have experienced pain and anguish. So anytime I come here, I come with a sense of awe, a sense of respect.
When Heinrich Richter dies in 1849, his ill-acquired fortune doesn't survive him. His wealth is built on a risky system of long-term borrowing and credit from suppliers and clients around the world. At the time of his death, he is burdened with debt and insolvent. His possessions are auctioned off, but the Richter Fort stays within the family and falls into disrepair. Today, the Richter Fort is all but gone. If it disappears completely, an important monument which bears witness to the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism will disappear forever.